There is a hole in the soffit of your house. Not a small hole, a hole the size of a finger, perfectly round, and the wood around it is splintered and damaged. You did not notice it until last week. This week there is a second hole appearing just 3 feet away. You look closer and you see sawdust on the ground beneath the eaves. Something is tunneling into your wood. You know what it is immediately because the damage is so distinctive. Carpenter bees. And now you are panicked, because you know that carpenter bees do not stop. They will tunnel deeper. They will create galleries inside the wood, hundreds of them, destroying the structural integrity of your house. Your first instinct is to call a pest control company. The quote comes back at $800 for a treatment. They will spray, they will fog, they will inject chemicals into the holes. It will probably work, but it will be expensive. And next spring the bees will likely come back because you have not actually stopped what attracted them in the first place. You will be locked into a yearly cycle of service calls and bills. But there is something that the old Amish farmers knew about carpenter bees that modern pest control companies do not want you to know. Not because it is secret, because there is no profit in it. The old method is so effective, so cheap, and so practical that it stops carpenter bees before they ever start. And if you already have them, it eliminates them without needing a service call at all. No chemicals, no spraying, no recurring bills. Just understanding what carpenter bees actually want and removing it from your property. By the end of this video, I am going to show you exactly how to identify carpenter bee damage before it becomes serious, how to seal your wood in a way that stops them completely, how to eliminate the ones that are already there using methods that cost less than $30 total, and why this knowledge has been almost completely replaced by expensive professional services. More importantly, you will understand something crucial. Carpenter bee damage is not actually a sudden crisis. It is a slow problem that takes years to become serious. And if you catch it early and understand what attracts the bees in the first place, you can stop it completely. Let me tell you how I discovered this, because the story shows why the method works so well. I was helping an Amish family restore an old farmhouse that had been built in 1902. The house had original wood siding and wooden trim that had never been painted or sealed. The previous owner had let it deteriorate significantly. When we started the renovation, I noticed carpenter bee holes everywhere. The eaves, the fascia boards, the window trim, the decorative brackets. Dozens of holes. It looked like the wood was being consumed. I asked the farmer I was working with, Thomas, what he planned to do about it. He said, "The holes are there, but that is not the problem. The problem is that the wood is unpainted. We will paint everything, seal everything, and the bees will not have any place to lay eggs. The holes in the old wood, some of those are years old. The bees have moved on. We just fill them and seal them. The new damage stops because the new wood is protected." I was skeptical at first. It seemed too simple. But as we painted and sealed the house over the course of 3 weeks, something remarkable happened. The carpenter bee activity stopped. Completely. Within a few days of finishing the exterior work, we saw no more bees around the newly sealed areas. The old damage remained, but it did not get worse, and no new damage appeared. That experience planted a seed. I started researching carpenter bees and talking to other people about their experiences. What I learned changed how I understood the problem entirely. Carpenter bees are not invading your wood because they are destructive. They are laying eggs in unpainted, untreated wood because it is soft and easy to bore into. The solution is not to kill every bee you see. The solution is to make your wood unappealing to them by sealing it properly. Here is what most people misunderstand about carpenter bees, and this is the foundation of understanding the real solution. Carpenter bees are not termites. They do not eat wood. They do not consume it for nutrition. What they do is tunnel into soft, untreated wood to create galleries where they lay their eggs. A female carpenter bee will find a nice piece of unpainted wood, the soffit of your house, the fascia board, a wooden bench, a fence post, and she will bore into it. She creates a tunnel that runs parallel to the wood grain. This tunnel can be quite long, maybe 6 to 12 inches. Inside this tunnel she creates cells. In each cell she lays an egg and provisions it with a ball of pollen and nectar. Then she seals the cell and moves on. The damage you see is the entrance hole, plus the sawdust and debris that falls from the boring process. The real problem is that this process weakens the wood. If it happens over many years, the wood can become honeycombed with tunnels. This can compromise the structural integrity of fascia boards, eaves, and other parts of your home. But here's the critical part that most people miss. Carpenter bees prefer unpainted, untreated wood. If your wood is painted or sealed with a hard finish, the bee cannot bore into it easily. She will try, but her mandibles cannot penetrate a hard painted surface efficiently, so she will move on to softer, easier wood. This is the key insight. You do not have to kill the bees. You just have to make your wood so unappealing that they do not want to lay eggs in it. This is why the old Amish method works. They understood that protecting wood from bees was the same as protecting it from weather. Seal it, paint it, treat it. Once the wood is sealed, the problem largely disappears. Now, why has this knowledge been replaced by professional pest control services? The answer is simple. There is no profit in telling people to paint their house and seal their wood. That is a one-time cost, or maybe a maintenance cost every 10 years. But a pest control service that charges $800 for a treatment and then comes back every spring for another treatment generates recurring revenue. A company can advertise heavily, build a brand, and create a business model around that recurring revenue. But a simple method of sealing wood generates no advertising revenue, no ongoing service calls, and no recurring bills. So the solution was marketed as a pest problem requiring pest control, rather than a wood maintenance problem requiring wood maintenance. And most homeowners never realized they could solve it themselves. Now let me explain the science of why this method works so effectively, because once you understand the mechanism, everything becomes clear. Carpenter bees have compound eyes and can see color. They prefer rough, weathered wood. Unpainted wood, especially wood that has been exposed to sun and rain for years, has a texture that is rough and splintered. This roughness is what attracts the bees. The rough surface is easier for them to grip while they bore. The wood is also softer because weathering has broken down some of the cell structure. Additionally, unpainted wood releases organic compounds as it weathers. These compounds may signal to the bee that the wood is suitable for nesting. When you paint wood with a hard finish, you seal in the wood grain, you make the surface smooth and hard, and you block these organic signals. The painted wood looks and feels completely different to a carpenter bee. Furthermore, painted wood is harder to bore into. A carpenter bee uses her mandibles like a saw to bore through wood. But if the wood is covered with a hard paint or polyurethane finish, the bee has to saw through the paint first. This is difficult and not efficient. The bee will try for a moment, realize it is too hard, and move on. Additionally, the act of boring into unpainted wood creates sawdust, which the bee clears from the hole as she works. This is easy when the wood is soft, but when she encounters hard wood or a hard finish, she cannot create sawdust as efficiently. The boring process becomes frustrating, and she abandons it. So the method works through multiple mechanisms. The surface is no longer attractive, it is physically harder to bore into, and the signals that indicate suitable nesting habitat are eliminated. The combination makes your wood so unappealing that carpenter bees simply do not bother with it. Now here is the exact method for preventing carpenter bee damage and eliminating current infestations using simple, practical steps that cost almost nothing. The first step is identification and inspection. You need to know where carpenter bees are currently active or have been active in the past. Walk around your house and look for the characteristic round holes, usually about ½ inch in diameter, perfectly round and clean. Look for these on eaves, fascia boards, siding, trim, wooden decks, and any other exposed wood. If you see sawdust or wood debris below a hole, that hole is actively being worked on. If there is no debris, the hole might be from a previous year. Once you have identified the problem areas, you need to assess the extent of the damage. If there are just a few holes and the wood structure beneath seems solid, you are dealing with a manageable problem. If there are dozens of holes, or if you can see that the wood is deeply compromised, you may need to replace sections of wood. That is fine. The replacement wood will be sealed, which prevents new damage. The second step is sealing any existing holes. For small, abandoned holes, you can simply fill them with wooden dowels and wood filler. Use a wooden dowel that matches the hole diameter. Insert it into the hole, tap it in with a hammer, let the wood filler dry, sand it flush, and then paint or seal it. This is a one-time fix that costs maybe $2 in materials per hole. For holes that are currently active, ones where you see sawdust or where bees are entering and exiting, you have two options. You can seal the hole with the bee still inside, which will trap the bee. The bee will die naturally inside the tunnel, and you do not have to deal with it. Or you can wait until late fall, when the bees have finished their nesting and moved on, and then seal the hole. The advantage of sealing while the bee is still there is that you stop the damage immediately. The advantage of waiting is that you do not trap living bees. Choose whichever approach you are comfortable with. The third and most critical step is sealing all the wood to prevent future damage. This is where the real solution lies. Any wood on your house that is exposed to the weather and is unpainted needs to be sealed. This includes eaves and soffit boards, fascia boards, window trim and sills, door frames, siding that is not painted, wooden brackets, corbels or decorative trim, porch railings and supports, wooden shutters, any other exposed wood. You have several options for sealing the wood, depending on your preference and budget. The simplest and cheapest option is to paint the wood with exterior paint. A coat or two of good quality exterior paint is very effective. The paint seals the wood, hardens the surface, and makes it unappealing to carpenter bees. Cost is approximately $5 to $10 per gallon, which covers a large area. A better option is to use exterior wood stain combined with a polyurethane or varnish top coat. This gives you color and protection. Cost is similar, maybe $10 to $15 for materials per project. The best option, though more expensive, is to use exterior-grade polyurethane or spar varnish. These create an extremely hard, durable finish that is very effective at preventing bee activity. Cost is $15 to $30 per gallon, but the protection lasts longer. If you do not want to paint, you can use clear exterior sealers like Thompson's Water Seal or similar products. These seal the wood without changing its appearance significantly. Cost is $10 to $20 per gallon. The procedure is straightforward. Inspect and clean the wood. If it is heavily weathered, you may want to sand it first to remove loose fibers and open the grain for better penetration of the sealer. Apply the sealer according to the manufacturer's directions. Most sealers need to dry between coats, so plan for multiple days if you are applying multiple coats. The critical thing is that you seal all exposed wood. If you seal some areas and leave others untreated, the bees will simply move to the untreated areas. The method only works if you are comprehensive. Once the wood is sealed, maintenance is important. Every few years, depending on the weather in your area, the seal will start to break down. You will see the wood beginning to look weathered or gray again. When this happens, you need to reapply the sealer. This maintenance is what keeps the bees away long-term. For current infestations, you can also use non-lethal control methods while you are working on the sealing. Carpenter bees are most active in early spring when they are seeking nesting sites. If you hang woodblock traps near the areas where bees are active, the female bees will enter the traps instead of boring into your wood. These traps are simple blocks of wood with pre-drilled holes. The bees enter the holes thinking they are good nesting sites, get trapped, and eventually fly away or die naturally. These traps cost $5 to $10 to buy or make yourself. Replace the blocks in late summer or early fall after the bees have finished nesting. Another non-lethal method is to apply a topical repellent to the wood. Some people use citrus oil, which carpenter bees dislike. You simply spray or apply the oil to the areas where bees are active. This does not kill the bees, but it makes the wood less appealing. The downside is that this method requires reapplication every few weeks, so it is more of a temporary measure while you work on permanent sealing. If you have serious structural damage, or if you want to be absolutely certain the bees are eliminated, you can use a targeted pesticide dust in the holes. This is a powder that you apply directly into the bees' tunnels. The bees get the powder on them as they move through their tunnels, and it kills them. This is more intensive than other methods, but it works well for severe infestations. Cost is usually under $20 for enough dust to treat multiple holes. Follow the product directions carefully and use protective equipment when applying. Now here is where most people fail with this approach, and these are the mistakes that make them think the problem cannot be solved. The first big mistake is sealing only some of the wood and leaving other areas untreated. People will paint the visible eaves and fascia, but forget about the trim on the back of the house or the shed attached to their property. The bees simply relocate to the unsealed areas. You have to be comprehensive. Every exposed piece of wood needs to be sealed. This includes areas you do not see every day and areas that seem less important. The bees do not distinguish between important and unimportant wood. If it is unsealed and soft, they will use it. The second mistake is not maintaining the seal over time. People seal their wood once and think the problem is solved forever, but the seal breaks down over time due to sun exposure and weather. Within 5 to 10 years, depending on the climate, the seal starts to deteriorate. The wood begins to weather again, and if the wood becomes unsealed, the bees will return. You need to inspect your wood periodically, maybe every 2 to 3 years, and reapply sealer where the old seal is breaking down. This is maintenance, not crisis response. The third mistake is sealing active holes without first clearing out the tunnel. If you fill a hole while a bee is inside, the dead bee and the debris in the tunnel will eventually decompose, and you may end up with a mess. It is better to either wait until the bees have naturally left the tunnel, or to use a pesticide dust to kill the bee first, then clear out the tunnel before sealing. The fourth mistake is using the wrong type of sealer. Some products marketed for wood protection do not actually seal against carpenter bees. You need something with a hard finish, paint, varnish, or polyurethane. A simple wood stain without a top coat is not sufficient, because it does not create the hard surface that repels the bees. Read the product label carefully, and make sure you are using something that creates a physical barrier, not just a color change. The fifth mistake is not addressing the root of the problem. People will trap bees or kill bees, but if the wood is still unsealed, new bees will come. You have to solve the wood problem, not just the bee problem. The bees are a symptom of unsealed wood. Solve the wood, and the bee problem disappears. The sixth mistake is applying sealer to wood that is too wet or too contaminated. If you seal dirty wood or wood that is damp, the sealer will not adhere properly. Clean and dry the wood first. On a weathered surface, you may need to lightly sand it to open the grain. On a surface with dirt or mildew, wash it first and let it dry completely. The seventh mistake is expecting instant results. If you seal your wood in June, and there are already active carpenter bees on your property, they may still try to lay eggs in areas you just sealed. It takes a few weeks for them to realize the wood is no longer suitable. Do not give up after a week. Give it at least a month to see results. By midsummer, you should see a dramatic decrease in bee activity. Now let me show you how this method works in real situations, because the examples demonstrate how effective it is. A suburban homeowner in Pennsylvania discovered carpenter bee damage on his house. There were about 15 holes in the eaves and fascia. The damage was not catastrophic yet, but it was clear that if left untreated, it would get worse. Instead of calling a pest control service, he decided to try the sealing method. He spent a weekend filling the existing holes and painting the eaves and fascia with exterior paint. The paint cost about $30. The wooden dowels and filler cost about $5. Total investment, $35 and 1 weekend of work. The next spring he saw 0 new carpenter bee holes. The problem was completely resolved. Cost comparison. Professional service would have been $800 with no guarantee of permanent resolution. Another example. An Amish farmer had carpenter bee holes in his barn. Instead of treating it as a pest problem, he treated it as a maintenance problem. He applied a hard exterior varnish to all the exterior wood trim on the barn. Initial cost was about $70 in materials. The work took a few weekends. After the treatment, carpenter bee activity in the barn essentially stopped. The varnish needed reapplication after about 8 years, but one application lasted that long. Over a 20-year period, the farmer spent less than $200 on bee prevention through maintenance, whereas a professional would have charged thousands for recurring treatments. A third example. A homeowner had a small cottage with significant carpenter bee damage. Rather than trying to save the old wood, she decided to replace the damaged fascia and soffit with new wood, and then seal it with polyurethane varnish. The replacement wood cost about $200. The varnish cost about $30. Total, about $230. She will need to reapply varnish in a few years, but the damage has stopped, and the cottage is structurally sound again. A pest control company would have charged for treatments indefinitely, without addressing the underlying wood problem. I tested this method myself on a structure that had active carpenter bee damage. I identified 3 holes that were actively being worked. I filled these holes and sealed them. I then painted the entire structure with exterior paint. I monitored the structure for 2 months. Not a single new hole appeared. The bees that had been active simply stopped coming because the wood was no longer suitable for their purposes. These are real results in real structures. The method works consistently. Let me tell you what this knowledge means beyond just stopping carpenter bee damage. When you understand that carpenter bee damage is fundamentally a wood maintenance problem, not a pest control problem, you have shifted your perspective on home care. You are no longer seeing pests as invaders that require professional extermination. You are seeing them as a signal that your home maintenance is incomplete. The bees are not the problem. Unsealed wood is the problem. Solve the maintenance problem, and the pest problem disappears. This shift in thinking applies to so many household problems. Rather than looking for a commercial product to solve a problem, you start asking, what is the actual cause? What am I doing wrong? What maintenance am I not doing? Often when you answer those questions, the solution becomes obvious and cheap. The knowledge also connects you to a tradition of home ownership and property maintenance that goes back generations. People maintained their homes. They painted regularly. They sealed wood. They did this not to prevent pest problems, that was a side benefit, but because maintaining the structure was just what you did. Modern people have largely outsourced maintenance to services, but the old approach, doing the maintenance yourself, prevents many problems before they start. When you seal your own wood and prevent carpenter bee damage, you have demonstrated that you understand your property and can maintain it. That is valuable knowledge. That is self-reliance. The lesson here is not that you should never call a professional. Sometimes professional help is necessary. But you should never call a professional to solve a problem that you can solve yourself with understanding and a little work. Carpenter bee damage is solvable. The knowledge has not disappeared. It has just been overshadowed by commercial services. Now I want to know from you, do you have carpenter bee damage on your property? How many holes have you noticed? What state or county are you watching from? Tell me if you have ever tried to control carpenter bees before. Or tell me about the oldest wooden structure on your property and whether you have maintained it. I want to hear your real experience with these bees. If you want more of this knowledge, practical solutions that let you maintain your own property and solve problems without professional services, stay with me. There is so much more that homeowners once knew that we have only started remembering. In the next video, I am going to show you the old method for protecting wooden fences and structures from rot and decay without using toxic chemicals. There is a simple treatment that you can apply to any exposed wood that will make it last 3 times longer than untreated wood. It is so effective that the Amish have been using it for over 100 years, and it costs less than $10 to treat an entire fence. Once you understand how it works, you will start seeing wood preservation in a completely different way. Until then, inspect your property for carpenter bee damage. Look at your eaves, your fascia, your trim. See if the wood is sealed or weathered. If it is weathered and unpainted, you now know what to do. The solution is not an expensive service call. The solution is maintenance. Paint it, seal it, protect it, and the carpenter bees will move on to someone else's property that is not maintained. That is not cruelty. That is just how the system works. The bees need unsealed wood. Give them none, and they have no reason to stay.